Hey everyone, welcome. We're all rushing to get AI into our classrooms, right? But what if these amazing new tools we're using have a hidden weakness? Today, we're diving into a really fascinating study that shows how a tool like ChatGPT-4 can actually perform worse when you switch from English to another language. And we're going to talk about what that really means for you and your students.
All right, here's our game plan. First, we'll pinpoint this hidden language gap. Then we'll look at a really clever experiment researchers designed to expose it. After that, we'll break down the results, get into why this gap even exists, and then, this is the important part, we'll talk about the real risks for education and finish up with a practical toolkit you can start using right away. So let's get right into it. The big promise of AI is that it can create personalized learning for every single student. But what happens if that promise kind of gets lost in translation? We're going to explore a pretty serious issue, the fact that AI's power might not be reaching all students equally, especially if they're not working in English. This question really gets to the heart of the research we're looking at today. It forces us to stop and think about the tools we're so excited to use. To ask, do they have a built-in bias? Are they designed with an English-first approach that leaves other languages behind? It's something we have to consider.
So how in the world do you actually test an AI for language bias? Well, the researchers behind this paper came up with a brilliant idea. They basically set up a challenge for ChatGPT-4, making it simulate a conversation between two very different, very famous people, and they gave it the exact same task in two different languages.
Now, the secret sauce for this whole experiment is a technique called in-context learning, or ICL. It sounds super technical, but it's not. All it means is that you give the AI specific examples and instructions inside the prompt itself, to show it exactly how you want it to behave. It's kind of like giving an actor their character notes right before they walk on stage.
And the characters they picked? This was a stroke of genius. In one corner, you have Paulo Freire, the legendary Brazilian educator known for his ideas on critical pedagogy. And in the other corner, Mark Zuckerberg, the tech giant focused on global connectivity. You couldn't ask for two more different worldviews. It's the perfect setup to see if an AI can handle complex, nuanced dialogue.
The method itself was actually pretty simple, but so effective. First, they designed a really detailed prompt asking ChatGPT-4 to imagine a conversation between Freire and Zuckerberg. Then, they ran that exact prompt in English. After that, they did it again, word for word, but this time in Brazilian Portuguese. And the final step, put the two responses side by side and see what happened.
So, what did happen when they put the English and Portuguese dialogues next to each other? Well, this is where it gets really interesting. The results were pretty stark, and they tell us a whole lot about how these AI models work or don't work across different languages.
The difference was obvious from the get-go. In English, the AI did an amazing job. It captured the deep philosophical ideas of each character and created these complex, detailed arguments. The Portuguese response, on the other hand, well, it was okay, it made sense, but it was just so much simpler. It was flatter. All that richness and complexity just kind of evaporated. So, just to sum up what they found, the English responses were consistently more detailed, used a much richer vocabulary, and, crucially, the AI did a way better job of staying in character as Freire and Zuckerberg. In Portuguese, the outputs were a lot more generic, the language was simpler, and honestly, the characters just didn't sound as much like themselves. So why? Why does this happen? Is the AI just, lazy when it comes to Portuguese? No, not at all. This performance gap isn't an accident. It's actually a direct result of how these massive language models are built and trained in the first place. The first big reason is something called multilingual bias. These AI models learn by reading a gigantic portion of the internet, and since a huge chunk of that data is in English, the model just has way more information, more context, and more examples to learn from when it's operating in English. It's just better trained for it. And the second reason is a totally wild process called internal double translation. Seriously, it's like a game of telephone happening inside the AI. When it gets a prompt in Portuguese, it sometimes quietly translates it into English to figure out the answer, and then translates that answer back into Portuguese before showing it to you. And just like in a game of telephone, with each of those translation steps, little bits of meaning and nuance get lost along the way.
And this brings us to what might be the most crucial point for every single educator listening. If you or your students are getting weaker, less detailed responses in a non-English language, it is not your fault. You are not writing a bad prompt. This is a fundamental limitation of the technology as it exists right now.
Okay, so we understand what's going on and why it's happening. But let's talk about the stakes here. Why does a technical limitation like this matter so much when we bring it into the classroom? The implications, it turns out, are huge.
These limitations create some very real risks. Think about it. A student's grade could literally depend on which language they use to prompt an AI. Imagine trying to assess two students, one using the tool in English, the other in Spanish. The quality of the AI's help could be totally different, leading to unfair grades. It could also accidentally reinforce stereotypes about certain languages being better or more academic, or even lead to flawed lesson plans if they're generated in a non-English language.
Now, the goal here isn't to scare everyone away from these amazing tools. Absolutely not. The goal is to use them wisely. So let's pivot from the problems to the solutions. Let's build out your AI literacy toolkit.
To really navigate this new landscape, every educator needs to know a few key concepts. We've already covered in-context learning and multilingual bias. The third one you have to know is hallucinations, which is just the techie term for when an AI confidently makes stuff up. Understanding these three ideas is really the foundation of being AI literate.
So what can you actually do in your classroom tomorrow? First, always use clear, simple language in your prompts. Second, if a prompt is for something important, test it out in English and another language and just see the difference for yourself. And here's a great idea. Turn this into a learning activity. Have your students compare the outputs. It's a fantastic way to teach them to be critical users of this technology.
And that brings us to the single most important takeaway from all of this. It's this: AI is an incredibly powerful assistant, but it is not an authority. The human, that's you, the teacher, and your student, must always, always be the final editor. Never, ever trust the output by default.
And so this leaves us with the big question we all need to start tackling together. As we bring these incredible tools into our schools, this research is a real wake-up call to be proactive. So how are we going to design our teaching practices, and how are we going to advocate for better technology to make sure AI becomes a tool that truly empowers and doesn't divide our wonderfully multilingual classrooms?